These are three super common materials used on a boat to make all kinds of different things. This is acrylic, this is starboard, and this is PVC board. Now let me tell you a little bit about each one of these individually, some of their attributes, and how you can know when and when not to use one of these materials when working on your boat. Looking at these three individually, let's take them starting with the acrylic and tell you a little bit about them before we get into how to use them. This is the acrylic, and as you can see, it is super shiny, and if you look at the side of it, you can see it's really dense. There's not a lot of space in between the different cells. It is a type of plastic, and I had to write down all the specific chemical makeups of each one of these different materials because there's no way I could remember them or get them right, and if you could, then you're way better than I am. But for the acrylic, this is actually an acrylate polymer, a group of polymers or plastics noted for transparency and elasticity, which wouldn't necessarily be this type of acrylic. That would be more something like this, which is also going to be called plexiglass, but plexiglass is more of a brand name. It's not really the type. That is an acrylate, an acrylate polymer. Now, this right here that we use for dashes and stuff like that, this is actually going to be a methyl methacrylate, also known as acrylic glass or plexiglass, a transparent thermoplastic. I think the big difference is that that is transparent and this is not. So if there's a difference beyond that, I don't really know what it is. As for our starboard, this is completely different. This is an HDPE, which stands for high density polyethylene. It is a thermoplastic polymer derived from petroleum and ethylene. So that makes it completely different. This is a lot more common than the other type of stuff that I got here, which is the PVC board. Now the PVC board, something else. If you look at looking at the starboard from the side, you can see, let me get a thicker piece. Looking at the starboard from the side, it also is very thick and dense. You don't see any really cells in between there. But our next piece, which is the PVC board. Now the PVC board, again, it just looks white. It's another type of plastic. This is actually made out of a lightweight, versatile plastic material made from polyvinyl chloride, resin, and foaming agents. And if you look at the PVC from the side, you can actually kind of see a lot of the different cells, and like you can see like holes in there. So you see all those different holes in the space between the cells. That's what makes it so lightweight, because it's a completely different material. Now, as far as the weight goes, acrylic is going to be the heaviest, starboard is the next heaviest, and the PVC board is the lightest of the three. I actually have some numbers that, make a difference. So the heaviest, being the acrylic, is 1.19 grams per cubic centimeter. And then the starboard is 0.955 grams per cubic centimeter. And the lightest, being the PVC board, that is 0.550 grams per cubic centimeter. So the starboard the PVC board is way lighter than the other three, but it is not nearly as durable as the other three. When it comes to durability, the acrylic is going to be the most durable, but it is also going to be the most expensive of the three. Being it's heavier, it's denser, the cells are packed in tighter, it gives you the most durability over the long run. Again, you can get it in a high gloss like this, or you can get it in a matte finish, which we use for dashes and stuff like that. Super common to make dashes out of. Some of the aspects to this, I put down melting point. So the melting point, because they're all three plastics, they do have a melting point to take into consideration when you're putting it on a boat and it's exposed to sun for a long period of time. As far as the acrylic goes, it has a melting point of 320 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a very high temperature. That compared to our starboard has a melting point of 248 to 356 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's say 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, very high temperatures. You're not going to see those high temperatures on a boat just as the boat is sitting. Whereas for our PVC board is got the lowest melting point, and it has a melting point of 185 degrees Fahrenheit, which you might be thinking that it's never going to get that hot on the boat, but over time, the degradation of this is going to play a big factor. And, over time, with it being exposed to sun, as the material breaks down, this is going to warp the most over an extended period of time. So that melting point does really come into play a factor when we're talking about putting stuff on a boat and where exactly you're going to put it. Now, when it comes to the UV resistance of the materials, acrylic is among the only manufacturing materials that is inherently UV resistant. It has a transparent plastic that suffers as little as 3% degradation over a 10-year period when used in outdoor applications, which is why we use it for dashes and stuff like that, because it's the most UV resistant. The sun doesn't really affect it as much as it does these other materials. Starboard is a little bit less, but it is still super UV resistant. As far as, it has excellent UV resistance and is often used in outdoor application. HDPE's UV resistance allows it to withstand prolonged exposure to sunlight, which can degrade many other materials. However, HDPE will eventually degrade over time, and with increasing UV intensity, to extend the lifetime of HDPE products and improve their UV resistance, manufacturers often add anti-ultraviolet components, which King Starboard does exactly that. It has UV protectants built into it, and it is super common to be used out in the sun on the boat, where it can be exposed to sunlight for a long period of time and not have very much degradation, as opposed to our PVC board, which will show degradation over time because the material will actually get, it's not that it necessarily will melt it, like that it's going to be dripping, but it will just lose its durability. And untreated PVC can discolor after prolonged UV exposure. So the way that I like to look at it is that this right here being PVC, yes, it does proclaim, like this right here, a lot of it is bought from Home Depot or Lowe's. It is an outdoor PVC cellular trim. People use it for siding on the side of their house, but a lot of them paint it. So it does hold up in that kind of situation, but most of the time it doesn't have direct sunlight on it all the time, and it is also usually painted, which also helps to protect it from the outside weather. So, it might have a life period of who knows how long. Maybe it's got a 20-year life period on the side of a house. It's not going to rot away like wood, and it'll last for a long time. I'm sure it'll last way more than 20 years. But if you were to use this in direct sunlight, it will depend on where you live. If you live in New York, where the sun is not nearly as damaging as it is in South Florida, this could probably be sitting in the sun on the side of a house and last for 100 years. You could probably also put it on your boat and it lasts 20 years with no issues, especially when you're keeping the boat inside or out of the sun. But down here in South Florida or in the Caribbean or in certain parts of Australia or in a desert-like climate, anywhere where you're close to the equator, where you're getting massive amounts of UV sunlight hitting directly on this material, it will degrade and it will, it'll basically fail. It's going to look terrible and it's not going to last as long as you would want it to last, especially if you were to paint this. If you were to paint this like a black or a dark color, that is going to make it heat up a lot quicker. And as it heats up, remember, we've got that 185 degree melting point. So if you can melt this at 185 degrees, imagine what kind of warping you're going to get at 140 to 145 degrees, which in direct sunlight in the middle of summer with this painted black, I could bet it could get that high. If not 130, 135, if not higher, like I said, to 145. That's going to make this warp very quickly. So me personally, I do not use this outside of the boat in direct sunlight. I think this is a perfect material for making backing plates, for making shelves, for making things that go in the bilge, for making things that go in your console, you're going to mount your electronics to it, stuff like that. That's what I use PVC board for, because it is a lot cheaper and it is a lot lighter than either of the other two materials, which makes it perfect for that type of use. But if you put it in direct sunlight, I don't recommend using this for that, again, because of those reasons. And another factor that is very important when talking about using this on a boat is the scratch factor. So if you can look in here, I'm trying to tilt this sideways so you can see some scratches in this. Obviously the high gloss is going to show scratches a lot quicker or more than a matte color. Matte color will kind of take scratches a little bit better. But as far as durability goes, this right here with my finger, if I were to scratch that, it's not scratching. You can see it is not scratching. If I were to take a screw, yes, I could scratch it. Same thing for our starboard. If we look at our starboard, I can scratch this like this, and as you can see, it is barely scratching, if at all. It doesn't really, it's very scratch resistant. It's not going to get scratched. So when you're hitting it with stuff, if it gets bumped by a weight or a hook or something, obviously a hook got a point on it, so it's going to scratch it. But this is way more scratch resistant, a little bit less than the acrylic. But when we look at our PVC board, if you look at this, just with my fingernail, if I go like this, you can see that scratch. I can scratch this so easy, it's not even funny. You can just push the stuff in. So you see that scratch? This is not very scratch resistant. Yeah, if you're talking about this, yeah, it's scratch resistant to that, but any kind of pressure, any kind of weight, this will dent, this will scratch very easily compared to the other two, which makes it another reason why you wouldn't want to use this outside on the boat, because over a long period of time when you're using the boat, that's just something that's going to happen with use of the boat. When you've got dive tanks, hooks, lead weights, fins, sandbar equipment, umbrellas, anything that you can think of on the boat, it's going to get scratched. So that is one other factor about this. Now, one of the downfalls to all three of these is that nothing really sticks to them. 4200 doesn't stick to them. Boat Life doesn't stick to them. Elastomeric, this is Total Boat Seal. This is an elastomeric. It does the best out of all of them. You can even get Sea Choice elastomeric, any of them. Elastomeric is probably one of the only products that does kind of stick to it. I wouldn't say that it is permanent, but it does a very good job. There are two things like this JB Weld plastic bonder that will stick to the starboard, and that will also stick to the PVC. You can also use for the PVC a tap poly weld, which is another plastic type of bonder, or you can also use a plastic welder that runs a bead or a weld of plastic that will bond to it. But other than that, nothing really sticks to them, especially the acrylic. The acrylic is probably the worst. King Starboard is the second, and then PVC it's PVC. You can use PVC cement and stick them if you wanted to. So that is one downfall to working with these products. Again, you want to use something like this that is an elastomeric. That's going to stick the best, but elastomeric is very difficult to work with. You have a very, very short window of working time, and once it gets on something, it's on there. So you have to be very quick and careful when you do use elastomeric, because it's a very, very good adhesive. So just be understanding of that when you are working with these products. Also, the last thing to talk about is the thicknesses. You can get each one of these material in different thicknesses, from I think all the way down to 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch. I think 1 inch is probably the biggest that you can get. I don't think you can get 2 inches or 3 inches. You might be able to. I've never had a need for ordering or buying something that thick, but I'm sure you could. I just don't really, it's not going to be super exciting. Home Depot's not going to be carrying a 3-inch piece of starboard if that's really what you wanted. Not to mention the weight is going to be a huge factor. So those are some considerations as far as the thicknesses of it is. Now, one last thing to say is that this material being super versatile, I have heard a lot of people use it for coring material. I don't know the longevity, or I mean, look at this. Look how easy that is flexing. But as far as will this accept resin? Kind of, not really, but kind of. I actually have made a transom out of this. A buddy of mine, I helped him make a transom in his whaler. It was a 13 whaler. So we did do that, and that lasted a long time. The boat's still good to go today. So for that, maybe, you know, I mean, it worked for that, but I've never tried to make stringers or a serious, you know, a 2-3 inch transom, like a legit transom on a 23, 24, 28 foot boat. Never tried to do anything like that. So I don't know if this would be really good for that. I know people have talked about doing that, but I've never put that to any kind of academical testing as far as, you know, usability goes. But it is super versatile, and it's something that you should know about. Like I said in the beginning, the acrylic and the starboard I would use outside on the boat to make dashes, panels, walls, anything like that. I would not use PVC board. I would use this only for inside stuff. I really only like using this inside the boat in a compartment that is not in direct sunlight and that isn't going to take a lot of abuse.